Hello, my name is Joanne. I am a I am a therapist. I hold a master's in social work. I have been working with youth for over 20 years. Um, my experience with youth have been everywhere from working with youth who've been exposed to domestic violence, all the way through to at-risk youth and youth that I have worked with in my gymnastics coaching career. So I have a wide array of experiences with youth, and as such, I have had the opportunity to observe well-regulated youth, as well as um, working with and teaching youth how to self-regulate. So I hope that the information that I provide with you or for you today is beneficial, timely, and practical as well. I really wish that we had been able to do this live on Wednesday. So fortunately, Facebook was not cooperative. There was just way too much volume. I guess like just too many users on the site. So we are talking about emotional regulation tonight. And I guess we'll get started. Okay, so what is emotional regulation? Well, emotional regulation is the ability to moderate your emotional reaction to situations that you are presently experiencing. So, how many adults have difficulty with emotional regulation? Okay, so let's actually define self-regulation a little bit more thoroughly. So self-regulation is the ability to manage your emotions and behavior in accordance with the demands of the situation. So that brings you back to how many adults are really adept at being able to emotionally regulate. Most of us struggle with it if we are stressed, if we are low on adequate sleep, if we are hungry. We all struggle with it. Yet oftentimes we forget how much of a struggle it is for ourselves, and we set somewhat unrealistic expectations for our children to be able to emotionally regulate themselves appropriately. Okay, so having talked about adults not being able to self-regulate themselves, that often comes as a result of not having had self-regulation role modeled adequately to ourselves. In addition to not always having the self-awareness to realize that we are about to be overwhelmed. So, for example, how many of us have been at the store and have kind of gotten, a little bit overly frustrated because there were just too many people in the store? For example, Costco, Saturday or Sunday definitely leaves me feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Just way too many people, too many bodies, too many people in my space. And I mean, I can manage it, but am I managing it as well as I would like to be? Probably not. Am I exasperated a little bit short with people, or a little bit just frustrated with the length of the lineup? Yes, I'm hoping that many of you can relate to this kind of a situation. So even though we've put ourselves very deliberately into that situation, it does not mean that we are always able to put the best part of ourselves forward. If that makes sense. So if we struggle with it, it only makes sense that our kids, whose brain development is nowhere near what ours is, are going to be less than on their best behavior in lots of situations. Part of that, or a huge component of that, is their prefrontal cortex is just not developed enough for them to be able to combine both insight as well as self-management. Because I mean, it's one thing to recognize, oh, I'm having a meltdown, and then to also be able to redirect yourself or to remove yourself from the situation or to engage other strategies that are going to help you to manage the situation. That a young person's prefrontal cortex has not done, hence their inability to actually self-regulate, as much as at certain times they seem to be able to do just fine. So once kids get to the point where they're no longer able to contain themselves, it's often because they are physiologically unable to calm themselves down. So whatever skills that they do have, they've exhausted them, and they are at the point where they just don't have any more internal resources. So what we need to do then is we need to learn, one, how to emotionally regulate ourselves, and then two, use that skill set to be able to teach our children how to regulate themselves. So that process then is called co-regulation. Now, as much as co-regulating sounds like it should be an easy process, this is where our trips to Costco and our reactions actually become significant. Because if we can't co-regulate ourselves, or if we can't regulate ourselves, and our stress response starts to engage, like it is in a really busy and overwhelming Costco environment, oftentimes what we want to do is retreat from those situations. And that means then that we also, when our child's in the midst of starting to lose it, we want to retreat. We don't want to, or we don't immediately start to engage our own regulation abilities and then tend to them. So we tend to want to move away from our child while they're floundering, and what they're really desperately in need of is help with their awareness of their emotions and how it is that they can contain themselves. So essentially, when you can stay calm and grounded and mindful of yourself and how you're responding to the situation, and then attend to your child, the more easily they'll be able to calm down themselves. And with strategies, they, over time, along with your consistency in employing those strategies and building up their confidence in their ability to emotionally regulate, they will learn how to. Of course, they'll become better at it the more physiologically developed they are. So what I mean by that is the more that their prefrontal cortex becomes developed. So this isn't a short-term mastery. If you have teenagers, you know this. But this is a lifespan kind of a development thing. Hope that makes sense. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we go about emotionally regulating ourselves, and then we'll come back to talking about how to emotionally regulate our children, so doing the co-regulation. So some problems that come with self-regulation are things that have happened within our own upbringings as children. So if we came from environments where there was a lot of chaos, there was a lot of dysfunction, then our abilities to self-regulate probably need some work. If there's been, where someone has come from a situation where there was a lot of just lacking of safety, there was probably a gap in your own learning of self-regulation in the context of self-soothing. So I hope that you've heard of self-soothing. So basically, self-soothing is like, well, being able to do whatever it is that you need to be able to ground yourself. So sometimes that might be engaging in a tactile kind of tactile experience where you can touch something soft, you know, feel the ground between or beneath your legs, that kind of thing, where you can then be in the moment. Okay, so oftentimes we have to evaluate ourselves and our skills in that area before we can do anything with our children. So from there, what I want us to sort of do is actually go through a few exercises that help us with our own emotional regulation. I'm just going to actually put on, oopsie, yeah, share with the screen here. Oh no, I've mislaid my PowerPoint presentation. It'll just be a moment. Where are you? Okay, here we are. Okay. All right, just gonna skip ahead here. Oh. No, I can't remember. There we go. Okay, so we're going to engage in a couple of mindfulness activities just so that we can get a good sense of just our own understanding of what we need to do. So the first exercise that we're going to do is the body scan. And in the body scan, I want you to, now normally we would do this lying on your back with your palms facing up and your feet falling slightly apart. So kind of like, oh, I can't remember what the pose is called in yoga, but this, oh wow. Okay, so just a very relaxed pose. But you can also do this exercise sitting comfortably in a chair with your feet resting on the floor. Okay, I want you to begin to notice, become aware of your breathing. So I'd like you to close your eyes. Just your posture, sit up nice and tall. And I just want you to breathe, just your normal rhythm. I want you to really become aware of the sensation of your breath flowing in through your nose. Notice the temperature, just notice, you know, the feeling of the friction of the air moving along your passageway. And then I want you to just expel it out. Don't want you to change the way that you're breathing. I just want you to bring gentle awareness to your breath. You used to do that for a few more breaths. Okay. So now what I want us to do is I want us to notice how our body feels. Okay, so what are the textures of the clothing that are resting against our skin? What is the contour of the surface of your seat along your body? What is the temperature of the room and how you feel within that context? You know, is the space that you're in full of distractions, or is it nice and quiet and soothing? Just going to give you a moment just to make those, just to notice those things. Okay, so what I'd like you to notice next is if there's any part of your body that is maybe got a tingling sensation that's occurring, if you've got any aches or pains or soreness, stiffness, any particular part of your body feels heavy or light. And then also, where are there areas of your body that feel hypersensitive? Or where are there parts of your body that just don't seem to have as much sensation as other parts of your body. Okay? As you notice these things, I want you to gently move whatever it is that I'm about to name for you. So I'm going to ask you to move the toes on both of your feet. Feel how that feels. And I want you to notice if you're wearing shoes or if you're just barefoot or if you're wearing socks, I want you to notice what the textures feel like on your skin, or what does the air feel like on the top of your foot. I'm going to move up to the lower legs. So how do your calves feel? How does the front of your legs feel? Is there tension there? I'm going to move up to the knees. I'm going to ask you to notice if there's any aching in those knees. Is there any tension? Notice your thighs. How tight are your quads? How loose do they feel? Move to your pelvic region, buttocks, tailbone, pelvic bone, genitals. How relaxed or how tense are you feeling in that area? What about your abdomen? Do you notice discomfort? Do you notice bloating? Your chest? Any tightness or discomfort? Lower back, we've been sitting for a little bit already. Noticing any tension there. Move to your upper back. Notice your ribs and your shoulder blades. You can move to your hands. Notice the feeling of your fingers, of your palms, backs of your hands and the wrists. Notice if there's tension there or any aches. I want you to move to your forearm, your elbows, and your upper arm. Any tension, any sensations there of note. What about your neck? Your neck feeling tighter on one side than the other. What about your face and your head? Your jaw tight, and you're grimacing. It's full of tension. Just take a few more breaths. When you're ready, just open your eyes. So hopefully that exercise helped you to realize that there are a lot of different sensations going on in our bodies that oftentimes we're not even aware of. Okay, so that's just sort of like a reflection of how we can have different areas of shortness, irritation, stress that could be wearing on us, and that we may not even be aware of in terms of the effect that it is having on us. Another activity that we're going to just talk about briefly, just in the interest of time, I can email to you the rest of these activities. But we're just going to go on to mindful breathing. I'm going to go to the 5 senses exercise. Sorry, guys. With the 5 senses, what I want you to do is, again, just center yourself in your chair Sitting up nice and tall, feet flat on the floor, hands on your lap. I just want you to focus in on your breathing again. Again, just notice your breathing. Don't try to change it. Just want you to notice the feel of the air rushing through your nose, filling up your lungs, your chest cavity opening up and breathing all the way down into your lower abdomen. If that's how deeply you breathe, and then just releasing that air. If you don't breathe that deeply, that's okay. Just really notice the air in your body. Okay. I want you to open your eyes, and you just have to note this quietly. You don't need to say it out loud, but often when I do this activity with people in my office, when I'm teaching them self-regulation, I will have them say what I'm asking them to observe. I will have them say it out loud. So what are 5 things that you can see? So in my space, I can see a feather, I can see salt rock, I can see sage, I can see a punching bag, and I can see a glass. What are 4 things that you can feel? Okay, so you can feel, in my case, I can feel the floor beneath my feet. I can feel the tightness of my leggings. I can feel the softness of my sweater. And I can feel the weight of the glasses on my face. Okay, what are 3 things that you can hear? Well, I can hear the sound of the computer. And that's really all that I can hear. Oh, I think I heard my cat. And earlier I heard dogs barking. Then I would move on to 2. So what are 2 things that you can smell? And I can smell the sage. And I can smell fabric softener. And then what is 1 thing that you can taste? So in my case, I had a glass of Pepsi earlier, so I can kind of taste some residue of that syrupy taste. Okay. And then I would have you close your eyes again and focus, pardon me, in on your breathing. 2 or 3 breaths. And then I would have you come back to the space. Okay, so these are different mindfulness exercises that you can do that help you to be able to get more aware and more proficient with your own emotional regulation. My favorite activity is the 5 senses, because regardless of where you are, you could be riding transit, you could be in a cab, you could be driving, you could be sitting at your desk, or you could be in the middle of your kitchen, and you are able to initiate your senses and be able to use that to calm yourself, okay, to become centered again. Once you become centered again, and you can get more proficient at it, and after a while, you can just, when you've practiced a lot, just engaging in that breathing can help you to just get grounded and be able to calm yourself so that you can then be able to work with your children to emotionally regulate them. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to chat about that also kind of helps us with our own thoughts, which play a big role in how we, plays a big role in our emotional regulation, essentially. So if we have thoughts about, for example, our child is having a tantrum in the middle of Costco, and what are the thoughts that happen when your child has a meltdown in the middle of Costco? Oftentimes there's feelings of, or thoughts of, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, I have to stop them, like this is just not acceptable, or what are people gonna think? We have all kinds of thoughts that are probably, for the most part, Not helpful. Not helpful for us to regulate ourselves, and certainly not helpful for us to be able to emotionally regulate or co-regulate our child. So this is this process of this cognitive triangle that you're seeing on the screen. Basically, it is from cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a best practice that is used to treat all kinds of things, from trauma all the way through to just depression, suicide, anxiety. So it's a very comprehensive treatment modality that we can use just sort of on a surface level like we're going to do today, but then we can also use it to treat much deeper concerns. But we just talked about some thoughts that are probably not helpful when our child is in the middle of having a tantrum. And when you have those thoughts of your child embarrassing you, or you being afraid of being judged, or just wanting it to stop, what are the feelings that you also have? Well, if I remember correctly, because it has been a while, my children are 28 and 26, embarrassment, shame, feeling inadequate, anger maybe, because maybe it's been a really long day already and Costco was the end of the shopping trip and you just wanted to get through the day well. So those could be some of the feelings that you're feeling. Now, how does those thoughts and those feelings impact your behavior? So if you're having feelings of anger, you're probably going to be frustrated. You're not going to be grounded and able to calm yourself down so that you can engage with your child and help them to remember what they need to do in order to calm down. Okay, and then of course, when our behavior is more and more chaotic, then we have a negative influence on other people. They have a negative response to us, which then just triggers the whole cycle again and usually leads to more negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative behaviors. So it becomes just an awful mess. So here's just another example of this process. So the situation is that a colleague repeatedly talks over me at a meeting. Your thoughts and beliefs are then, well, she's a bitch. How dare she? She did that deliberately. She's full of herself. She's ruthless and would trample on anybody to get attention and get ahead. She's horrible. I hate her. Okay, so those could be some of the thoughts that you have based on the other person's, like based on the situation, so how that person's behaving. So then, what do those thoughts do in terms of, what do they trigger in terms of your behavior? So you might imagine scenarios and conversations, right? So just have ongoing dialogue in your head where you're perseverating on just how horrible the situation is, where you put them down, you know, maybe start rumors or gossiping just because you're so frustrated. Well, that obviously leads to negative emotions and vice versa. I mean, the thoughts go to the emotions and the behavior, but it can also go the other way. But so how does that thinking make me feel? Right? It makes you defensive, angry, aggressive, right? So then it influences the negative behaviors. There's also a significant physical component as well. So like when you get that angry and aggressive or unable to center yourself, your heart beats faster, you have butterflies in your stomach, you get hotter, you get red, your blood pressure goes up, you become tenser, you breathe shallower, which then leads you to think less clearly. Okay. We'll do another example. So again, a colleague repeatedly talks over me in a meeting. This time the thoughts or beliefs are, gosh, that's a bit rude and thoughtless. I have something to say here too. So then that goes into the emotions of feeling annoyed instead of feeling full of rage. So then how does that impact your behavior? Well, you might interrupt her to say, sorry, hold on, you're not letting me make my point here, or I wasn't done speaking. Or I might make a point and then you might want to vent to a colleague, but in this situation, you may not have been as escalated and you may be able to let it go sooner. So the physical responses would be that your heart beats a little faster, you might get a little warmer, you might have a slight change in your breathing, but it's not as intense as it was in the previous example. Now, if we can really engage in positive thoughts and positively looking at the situation, then it can lead to a very different outcome. So again, a colleague repeatedly talks over me in a meeting. This time my thought is, she's a bit overexcited, maybe a bit annoying, or maybe she's like super passionate. That could be another thought. Your emotions might be, you're a little irritated and frustrated, but you're not holding on to it. You're not letting it get to you. So then maybe your behavior this time is rolling your eyes, or teasing her in the canteen later, like, geez, you were excitable today. Those kinds of things. And your physical response is just a little bit of discomfort, or maybe it's just like, oh well, and you don't even have an emotional reaction. Another example of this would be like in traffic. How many people, and some of you might have road rage. And actually this scenario really can be applied to the way in which you see traffic and transgressions and things that lead to road rage. In my situation, for example, I have over the years realized that so long as there hasn't been an accident, it's probably not worth my having any sort of a response. I'll give you a situation or an example of a situation. My ex-husband and I and our daughters were in the car, and we were driving along, and my ex was a very aggressive driver, and there was a car that was speeding along, and I don't know quite how they ended up engaging, but this guy in this car and my husband started to become competitive with one another as we were going down Deerfoot. And the guy in the car cut us off, and then Steve got frustrated and sped up, and in any event, we were getting close to the exit that we needed to take. And in fact, I think I was the one who became more aggressive in that situation, and I think I raised my finger at the gentleman in the car, and that escalated the situation, and he was so irate that he ended up trying to follow us on the exit ramp, but was so unaware of what was going on around him that he drove his car up onto the meridian, and it was a low car. So that's just a series of really poor self-management that really could have escalated. I mean, it was serious as it was, but I mean, had he followed us, it could have gotten far worse, right? So that situation just taught me a lot about it's not worth it. So yeah, I just, I shrug it off, and it doesn't take up more than a second. And I mean, I can be as angry as I want to be, but I mean, if the person in the other car, they can't hear me, they're probably focused on something else and not even aware of what it is that they did. So it's not worth the physiological response on myself. So the increase in blood pressure, the irregular breathing, just all of that nonsense. And so, yeah, I have learned to be able to take the situation of driving with bad drivers and moderate my thoughts and beliefs to being, it's okay, you're safe, let it go. Okay. Let's see what time it is. Okay. So these are things that we need to do in order to be able to learn how to regulate ourselves. So then comes the emotional regulation with your child. Okay, so what are the things that we can do to teach them how to be self-regulated through the co-regulation? So it goes without saying that our kids are more often observing than they are we're role modeling, and they're observing far more than what we ever want to acknowledge. So in the car example, or the road rage example, the kids were in the car and they saw the like they saw the event escalate. That could have gotten really serious, as I said, and that would have put all of us in jeopardy. Not worth it. So my girls do take a bit after their dad, but they're not nearly as escalated when it comes to road rage. And I think that is because they did get a more healthy balance of just how to moderate or how to respond to the situation. So remember that what you do is being observed. All right. Well, that's interesting. Oh, here we go. I missed something. I apologize. Oh, okay. So step one is really just basically paying attention and noticing if there's a common theme of situations where they become really overwhelmed and noting it and bringing it to their attention when they are calmer. So saying, geez, I noticed that, when it comes to engaging with so and so, that oftentimes you get really overwhelmed. I wonder what that's about. And maybe having them try to engage in some reflection if they're capable of doing that. If not, just sharing in that, I've noticed that. And, talking to them about, like, I wonder if there's some other ways that we can deal with these situations. Giving them the ability to find words, because oftentimes, they don't want to behave this way. It's not like it's a choice. This is very much so just like a response. Their brain gets, like, their prefrontal cortex gets hijacked, and they're completely unable to be able to manage themselves. So by bringing attention to what you're seeing and offering them an opportunity to discuss it without there being shame or blame can really help to create an opportunity for there to be discussion, as well as, like, just creating safety for them to be able to talk to you about it. Okay. Step two is help your child to be a stress detective. So very much what we already talked about, where you bring it to their attention. This would be more about, so you seem really, really angry. Can you tell me what this is about? Like, how is it that you got to this reaction? Now, it might not be those words that you need to use, but you could say, oh, I've noticed that you were really mad, or I noticed that you seemed to be really upset or sad about a situation. What was that about? So giving them the language so that they can start to investigate and be aware of, like, oh, this, when I behave like this is called sad. When I behave this way, this is me being impatient. Okay. The next step would be to empower your child with knowledge. Okay, so letting them know that, with one of the things is just to explain to them how their brains work, right? So that they understand that their behavior isn't bad, that it's just not appropriate. Okay, I think that that's oftentimes, well, for me, that's a very important distinction to make for children, is that their behavior is not bad, right? When you do not have the skills, you have not been taught and given the opportunity to learn, or if your brain just hasn't developed enough so that you are capable, that is not about being bad. Okay, so it's about creating an opportunity for them to become knowledgeable about themselves. So explaining about the differences between the thinking part of the brain and the emotional part of the brain, or the logical and the emotional, okay? And that there is room for both, but both aren't always appropriate. Okay, so that's about then understanding the appropriate response given the situation. We can talk to our children about, just like us, noticing different sensations in our bodies, teaching them about different sensations in their bodies, right? So, like, do you notice that your heart is pounding? Do you notice that your palms are getting sweaty? Or do you notice that you're getting really hot before this becomes the behavior? Okay, that helps them to become that inquisitive person about themselves, that curious person, and develops that social, or that self-awareness. Um, Teaching them just about basic emotional intelligence, right? So again, learning about ways of expressing their emotions that are appropriate, labeling the emotions, allowing them to be able to problem solve. So when you behave in this way that isn't appropriate for the situation, what are some ways in which, like, what do you need to do afterwards? So maybe your child's had a tantrum in the store because they weren't able to, you said no to them being able to buy something. Completely normal and appropriate boundary being set for your child. But then them knowing, because they've set the consequence to that behavior, what it is that's going to happen after they've had the tantrum and they've regulated themselves. Creates safety, that creates confidence, and that creates self-efficacy. And then in the moment when they are losing their minds, one of the, like, so the ways in which we have to interact after we have emotionally regulated ourselves, quickly engaged in deep breathing, quickly, oriented ourselves using our senses, just recognize that, oh, I'm feeling super tense, I'm feeling very short, like my patience is limited. So doing what you need to do to be able to bring yourself out of that, and then engaging with your child. Okay, so that might be reminding them to just to focus on their breathing, reassuring them that they're okay, that they're safe, and that they can soothe themselves, or that you're going to also help them be soothed. So that could be the rubbing of their back, it could be rubbing their hand, right? It gets them into this moment as opposed to being stuck in the emotion. You can work with them on breath practice as well. So, I mean, they may not be able to engage in that immediately, obviously, if they're still in the process of being so incredibly overwhelmed, but that could be part of the problem solving that they go into. So after you've calmed down, then we're just gonna just breathe for a few minutes, okay? And then we're gonna talk about how you feel. And so we have a process where we can deconstruct what happened and teach them to be able to deconstruct so that they can reflect and then become better at self-management. So just a quick um, quote. There isn't a single child who, with understanding and patience, can't be guided along a trajectory that leads to a rich and meaningful life. That is Dr. Stuart Shanker. So yeah, I think that that's just important to remember. I truly believe that all of us are a work in progress, that there are areas of development that all of us have or needs to work on. There are areas where we are very confident and capable, but it's usually because we've had the opportunity to practice. And so, in a forgiving space where we can build confidence. So that's basically some of the strategies that I have for you for working with trying to regulate your child, recognizing that you are the core of that emotional regulation. You have to be able to regulate yourself, and then it's about teaching your child how to regulate, doing so in a very collaborative way. Okay, so skip over that. I just want to end on the note, I guess, about um, just how stressful the current environment is, and that right now it's really difficult for there to be emotional regulation for yourself because there's so many unknowns. I'm sure lots of you are trying to navigate working from home, trying to help your children with homeschooling, maybe being confined more than normal with your family members. So, as much as you might love them, that doesn't mean that they're not irritating the crap out of you. There's a lot to navigate on top of just the fear, the lack of like the change in routine and the situation just not making any sense. I mean, we can understand it from like a cognitive perspective, but we haven't lived this before. So as much as we might understand it, there's an awful lot of all of this process that we do not understand. And I want to stress for you that that is okay. It is absolutely okay to be afraid, to be grieving that things are maybe not going to be the same for a long time. And who knows what that even looks like or what that time frame looks like. That some people might lose their family member as a result of this COVID-19. It's okay to be completely lost, and it's okay for you to not be doing your best at being self-regulated. So I want you to really think about self-compassion and just doing the best that you can and that being enough. But extending that, I guess, to everyone else in your realm. So whether that's about emotionally regulating your child, you're going to be short sometimes, and that's okay. So long as you balance it out with being able to have better moments with them than not. And it's okay if they melt down because this is all really weird for them and not making a lot of sense. I mean, it's not summer, it's not Easter. We were just on spring break. Everybody's home. People are not going to the grocery store. Well, they say that there's this really awful illness, but like it just doesn't make sense. So it's okay if they're confused and it's okay if they're not on their best behavior. And I think if we allow each other to at least recognize, I guess, that we're not at our best, that we're just all doing the best that we can, that will allow us all a little bit more grace. And it's okay to like have a family meeting and talk about that and to say, you know, maybe at the end of the day when you're tucking your children in at night, to reflect on saying, you know, I noticed that this was, you know, you were really struggling today and it's okay. You know, that we love you. And so communicating, I guess, positives, but also using the moment to learn, but not in a punitive sense. Okay? That's where that compassion comes in. So teaching each other how to have compassion for yourselves. I hope that this has made some sense. I also wanted just to recommend Alberta Health Services has recently just put out in the last week, 2 weeks, this guide. It's called Living with Worry and Anxiety Amidst Global Uncertainty. It's a psychology tools handout. It uses some of the CBT skills that I was mentioning earlier, but it talks about worry, what is good worrying, what is poor worrying, how to reframe things like we were with our thoughts in the previous example, as well as some handouts for you to write stuff out. There's some nice charts. So I would really encourage you to print this off and review it, but just some tips to further get through this awful situation or this different situation, however you want to frame it, but set a routine and make it as rigid as you need to or make it as flexible as you need to. We know that with routine, it just helps with, you know, knowing what comes next a little bit, but it's okay if we deviate from that too. Stay mentally and physically active as much as you can. Having said that, it's okay to just have a day where you just veg a little bit, so long as that's a day or two and not becoming a pattern of behavior where there's avoidance and just lack of engagement altogether. Practice gratitude. As much as that may seem silly to try to find every day something that you're thankful for, even if it is just that there was food on the table, or that you still have a roof over your head, or that, you know, there's still like grants coming in and that kind of stuff. Scientifically, there's something called neuroplasticity. So essentially, our brains are moldable, and when we engage in activities like gratitude, we are creating new neural pathways in the brain, and so we are rewiring our brains in order to make them basically functioning in a happier and more productive manner. And then notice and limit worry triggers. So again, if you need to disengage from watching the news, it's okay. There's a limit that all of us can take, and you don't need to know necessarily with the amount of people that have passed away today. It's okay if you don't pay attention to that piece of what's going on. Just be confident in setting the limit that you need to, that's going to work best for you. And then again, rely on repeatable news sources for the times that you do engage, so that the information you're getting is the most up-to-date and the most clinically appropriate. I hope that this was helpful to you guys. I really would have liked to have been able to answer questions along the way. However, having said that, I'm more than willing, if you are interested in being able to provide you with a Q&A kind of a session as well. There we go. And I'll just finish with letting you know my therapy practice is called Rooted in Hope Therapy Services. My website, the website is rootedinhope.ca. You can reach me at 403-304-2289, and you can email me at Joanne, JOANNE, at rootedinhope.ca. I look forward to speaking with you all in the future. Thank you so much.